critic is a creature who has views quite like a camel's. Flowers and fruit he scorns. In the flower garden of the honeyed muse he starves unless he finds a meal of thorns. Welcome to A Meal of Thorns, a critical book club from the Ancillary Review of Books. I'm Jake Casella-Brookins. Each episode, we dive into works of speculative fiction, looking at how they work, what they're doing, what we think about them, and we're joined by scholars, writers, and critics. Today, we're joined by Archita Mittra to discuss Joe Walton's novel, Among Others. Archita is a writer of fiction and nonfiction, an editor, teacher, and critic. Her reviews appear in Locus, Strange Horizons, Interstellar Flight magazine, and more. She has recent fiction publications in Lightspeed, Kaleidotrope, Luna Station Quarterly, and the Blaff Book of Anti-Caste SF, to name just a few. Her work has shown up on lists including the Pushcart and Ignite Awards. Archita, thanks so much for joining. How you doing?
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm doing good. How about you?
Doing pretty good. Yeah, it's extremely cold and icy here in Buffalo, so I'm happy to be inside. But yeah, doing pretty good. I keep every time people ask how I'm doing, I'm putting like this big caveat because things in America are really, really screwy right now.
I keep looking at the news. I'm doom scrolling on Twitter all the time, and every time I open Twitter, it gets worse and worse.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where like I want to acknowledge it, but I also
Yeah,
want to kind of like keep continuing with my life and
yeah,
like, like I don't know, can't be dooming all the time. So
yeah.
yeah, but I'm doing pretty all right. Yeah, what's good with you? I wanted to ask you before we dive into the book today, which we're talking about among others, if you've been reading anything else interesting or working on anything cool been on your mind.
I mean, like I'm always reading something or the other. It's like I have my thousand tabs open on my phone with different short fiction magazines with fan fiction.
Mm.
But yeah, recently I finished reading Fathom Folk by Eliza Chan.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
reviewing it for Strange Horizons, and it's quite a refreshing political fantasy where the humans and the magical underwater creatures are at constant loggerheads,
Mm.
and it's quite an interesting book. I also read this romantasy called Immortal by Sui Lin Tan, which I'm
Okay.
supposed to review for locals, which was like quite like just a fun read. And I also finished reading Lavanya Lakshminarayan's latest novel, Interstellar Mega Chef, which I really enjoyed. It's like it dives into like food history, alien
Mm-hmm.
civilizations, and also has this very wholesome enemies to friends to lovers romance with like very morally gray characters. So yeah, I strongly recommend that. It was
Oh, cool.
quite a lovely read.
Yeah, I've been hearing good things about that.
Yeah,
I've had 10% Thief on my shelf forever. I
yeah,
need to get around and read that. But
yeah. That's also pretty brilliant. It's a mosaic novel set in this futuristic India where there's a lot of advances in technology, but it comes at the cost of the people's empowerment. So it's told in form of these interconnected short stories which add up to this larger narrative. So it's
mm,
quite interesting. That like well done.
cool. Yeah, I just finished up reading Dengue Boy by Michael Neva,
Yeah.
which is wild. It's bonkers. I really enjoyed it. It's really like I don't know. It's very like gory and like it has like this like it's very like
Yeah.
splashy. It has a lot of
Okay.
exclamation marks, and yeah, I'm working on reviewing that. And the thing it's kind of reminding me of a little bit is the exposition in comic book panels where everything
Okay.
is like, as you know, this thing is happening, blah blah blah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exclamation mark. But it's this like post climate disaster kind of like satire send up.
Okay.
It's set in like Antarctica and like the very southern tip of South America and Argentina after they've
Mm.
become like these sort of like flooded tropical zones.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's wild. I got a kick out of that, and I'm also I'm rereading right now Isaac Fellman's Notes from a Regicide.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of that. I haven't read it yet. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, get it on your list. I'm
Yeah.
just screaming about it. I never want to talk about a book like granularly, like chapter by
Yeah.
chapter. That's just not how
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
about it. But with this, I would join a book club that like read this like page by
Wow.
page. It's every
Yeah.
line. I'm just like, how I don't know how Feldman does it, but
Maybe just to start a book club like the characters and among others. Like
yeah, uh-huh. Oh, well, yeah, that's a great segue.
yeah,
Let's talk about Among Others.
yeah.
Yeah, so today we are talking about Joe Walton's novel Among Others. It was published in 2011 by Tor. It follows a Welsh teenager who has magical powers. It's set in 1979, early 1980, and it's a coming of age novel, but it's also a love letter to science fiction and fantasy because the protagonist is a big reader, and how she reads, what she reads, finding other people who read the same stuff is kind of a big part of the book. And we should probably note that Jo Walton, as well as being a writer of science fiction, she is a very influential critic and reviewer. So that's sort of deep in how
Yeah.
this book works. It won the Hugo, the Nebula, and the British Fantasy Awards. Yeah, great book. Tell me a little bit about your relationship, either with this book specifically, or maybe like with Jo Walton's work more generally.
Well, I remember reading this book when I was in university around 2016 or 17, and back then I did not know much about like the whole SSF short fiction market, or I don't know much
Mm.
about the awards and stuff. Like, I mean, like of course I grew up reading Tolkien and the other SSF books, like kind of they're very similar to the way our protagonist does in the book, but I did not have that like this awareness of this wider world where people
Mm.
actually interacted and talked about it, and that these fanzines and fanish communities existed. So reading that book kind of took me back to my own childhood when I would like read a lot of books and not care at all about the outside world, and books were like this coping mechanism. But at the same time, it also introduced me to the wider world of SFF,
Hmm.
which is again similar to the journey that the main character goes through at the end of this book. So reading it always brings back a lot of these very fond memories. So it's a very nostalgic book, but it also the nostalgia works in so many different ways.
Yeah, yeah, big same for me. And, I'm always kind of like skeptical of books that lean into like nostalgia, but this one
Yeah,
is so
yeah,
specific. Yeah, when I first read this, and this wasn't the first Walton I'd read. I'd read a couple other things. I
mm,
really like her work a lot.
mm,
I remember specifically, I got it. I probably like pretty soon after it came out. I opened it, and one of the epigraphs is "El Paren"
yeah,
from Le Guin's *Lathe of Heaven*, which that was a book that I read. I don't know, when I was 18 or something, and had like a really was
yeah,
really influential on me. And seeing that like unexplained as just like kind of the first thing you see when you open this book up just kind of floored me, right? And if you don't know what that
yeah,
word means, like it doesn't mean anything to you, but it
yeah,
was it to me was like this immediate recognition that like, oh, this book is for people who've had this kind of
yeah,
experience and kind of welcoming in. And that's kind of a double-edged sword because again, if you
yeah,
haven't read that, it doesn't do anything. But yeah, reading this again, and I don't know that I've ever read it since the first time. I was just really almost kind of overwhelmed by some of the weird parallels between the protagonist's life and my own experience, even though
yeah,
like
yeah,
I was not growing up in this part of the world at this
yeah,
time, but that feeling of kind of like, especially I think if you're reading as a teenager,
yeah,
pre-internet or not terribly connected, that feeling that you're kind of on your own and
yeah,
you're trying to find more stuff and you're so excited about the
yeah,
stuff you're reading, and then when you do find someone you can make a connection with, that kind of like
yeah.
excitement about connecting over it.
No, I think the protagonist is it's like she's deliberately written to be very relatable. Like I know
Mm-hmm.
Walton, like she's drawing on her own childhood. Like I think she says somewhere that it's one of her most autobiographical books.
Mm.
But I feel like that whole sense of being this lonely teenager who is like just reading books to cope with life, and of course like the main character, she goes through a lot of trauma at the beginning of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Like she's had to fight her evil mother. She's lost her twin sister, and now she's being forced to go to this boarding school where she doesn't fit in with anyone. And the only solace, the only companion that she has are these all these SF books that she just devours day after day. So I think for anyone who's just like has a whose hobby is reading, who's grown up reading, they'll find something to relate to that, to sympathize and
Mm-hmm.
even empathize with the main character and their journey.
Yeah, and I always kind of want to preemptively defend this book, just because like I can. There are a lot of books and movies that lean so heavily on just using reference and allusion as how they
Yeah,
work, and those tend to like kind of like make me want to tear my hair out. Like I'm thinking of
yeah,
something
yeah,
like I think something like Ready Player One is just like
yeah,
really not for me, even though I share
Yeah.
a lot of the cultural
Yeah.
things it's pointing towards.
Yeah.
Or things like, I don't know, Stranger Things. I was just kind of like, well,
No, I feel like there's this whole move towards this weaponization of nostalgia
mm-hmm,
in like in popular culture to sell stuff, but in this book it comes off very authentic, like
mm-hmm,
because it's also the writer drawing upon her own experiences and also I think like all of us who've grown up like reading books, we all have kept our own list and we have our own reviews of books even before we know what a book review is. So I think the nostalgia it comes off very authentic and very sincerely, which I think makes it
mm-hmm,
very different from other pop culture like media where they try to forcibly use nostalgia to
mm-hmm.
to promote their stuff.
And I think there's something about the way that the Mori is actually thinking about the actual books that she's
Yeah,
talking about, right? Where it's not like, oh, I like Star Wars, so I like wear a Star Wars T-shirt.
yeah, yeah,
She's reading these books and like taking their worldview, their philosophy. She's kind of
yeah,
arguing with them. She's like
yeah,
presenting her aesthetic ideas about how they work or don't work.
yeah,
So it's just this more like genuine engagement, and like I
yeah,
think you you could have a book like this. Maybe there are books like this that aren't about
mm,
science fiction and fantasy, about
mm,
anyone who's like a really
yeah,
prolific reader and like drawing a lot of
yeah,
their worldview from it.
yeah,
This is just specifically that. And I also think it's the, as science fiction readers
mm,
and fantasy readers, it's so easy to latch on to that aspect of this book, and it is a big thing. But this book does have a plot, and it has stuff going on
yeah,
that's not about
yeah,
that. So I don't know.
yeah.
I was curious if there were any of the particular books that Maury reads or talks about that had like you had strong reactions about or anything.
I mean, I guess it would mostly be the Lord of the Rings.
Mm,
Where every time she mentions Tolkien, like it's very clear that like Tolkien has had this huge influence on her, and whenever she relates to the outside world, whether she's interacting with the fairies, she is comparing them to Tolkien, and when she tries to translate what the fairies are saying, she tries to use this like high fantasy language to evoke that. And also, like when I remember reading Lord of the Rings in this sort of fever dream when I was in middle school,
mm,
so I got completely like empathized with all of that. There are lots of other books that she mentions that I haven't read, but like I've heard of, and also like I could like understand this whole need to keep these little lists and like sort of like archives all these developments in SFF over the years. Like when she discovers that James Tiptree Jr. is actually a woman, like it's also
yeah.
like I guess not just a love letter to all these SF books, but also, like sort of memorializing these key moments in SFF
Hmm.
in this diary of a teenager.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and like when they're talking about, Le Guin and Delaney,
Yeah,
there's this sense of like not just that we're reading the books that are coming out, but they're like the readers are
yeah,
part of this sort of like living movement that's
yeah.
happening where
They're
there's
part of
art.
this history that's unfolding,
Yeah.
sort of.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so when she's reading new, like she reads that part about fear being the mind killer, and
Mm-hmm.
that whole paragraph becomes a sort of a spell that she uses to protect herself from her mother. So it's not that she's just reading the books, but she's actively like taking stuff from it, and she finds
Mm-hmm.
wisdom and advice, and basically the books that tells her basically how to live her life and how to protect herself and what choices to make. Like one of the most heartbreaking moments in the book is when I think middle where she is talking to this a fairy and she doesn't want to keep on living because she's missing her
Mm-hmm.
sister so much, and then the fairy says halfway, and that's supposed to be a reference to the Babel 17 that she's reading, and that basically like if she dies right now, then she will not be able to find out how the book is going to end, and that gives her a reason to keep living. Like she's living not for anyone else, but just to find out how her favorite story will end. So I think a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people who are depressed or was struggling to find reasons to stay alive. Like art can be such a valuable and a cathartic reason to stay alive.
Yeah, that halfway moment is really really great. I love that. Yeah, I have a similar sort of just like bedrock Tolkien
Yeah,
love and knowledge that makes a lot of this book work for me really well. That
yeah,
when they're so the book kind of opens with them casting that spell to make the coal
yeah,
factory shut down,
yeah,
and when nothing happens, they say I thought there would be Huorns.
yeah,
Which is just like, oh,
yeah,
that's so great. Like, yeah, I thought
yeah,
tree monsters would walk in and get it. Although another example of like if you don't know what the Huorns are, that's probably not going to hit.
mm,
Although I have a hard time imagining someone reading this book without having encountered
yeah,
at least
yeah.
Tolkien, if not everyone in here. But
Especially with the movies, I'm sure most
yeah,
of
right, right.
the people will have watched the movies at
Yep.
least.
I think I saw there's a couple lists online of all the books that are referenced here, and it's
Yeah, I have one of them bookmarked because intend to eventually go through them at one point.
yeah, and it was when I saw the whole list, I was like, oh wow, this is actually more than I thought. I knew it was a lot, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
I don't know, hundreds. It's pretty great. The one author that was jumping out at me in here, and for my sins, we're probably going to do an episode sometime on Heinlein, on Robert A. Heinlein,
Yeah.
who we don't need to unpack here in this episode because that's a whole giant big topic that whole books are written about. But I have problems with Heinlein, sort of like ideologically, politically, and it was weird to see him in this mix, and it kind of made me think a lot about how this protagonist is very intelligent, right? It's very precocious, very smart,
Yeah.
but that even so, it's hard when you're reading stuff and you really like the stuff you're reading that you can just kind of like pull in and absorb a lot of stuff. I think especially when you're younger, uncritically, and just kind of become part of your mindset. And that's so seeing Heinlein here. It's like a little weird, like being like theoretically like okay with incest. That's a really weird thing to pull like as a
Yeah.
teenager out of fiction, right? And like it's totally in Heinlein. Like Heinlein's pretty explicit about it. So that is one of those things where this is not purely just a like rosy, it's
Yeah.
not just
Yeah.
a love letter. It's kind of aware that
Yeah.
these are big, complicated ideas. And I think I don't know if Maury knows this, but I think the reader reading that, in those scenes has to be aware, like, oh, that's not great. Maybe you shouldn't be
Yeah.
shouldn't be picking that up.
Yeah, also I think like when you are young, you don't always like get to control what you read. Like you
Hmm.
don't have access to I don't know, like other critical avenues, and also you're just basically just going to the bookshop or getting whatever you get in the library, and you don't like judge that. You just like just take what you get. So
Hmm.
a lot of like the protagonist, whatever she reads, like it's also the fact that these are the books that she has access to.
That was one of the strongest nostalgia things for me in like a weird way. Because for me, and I imagine it's
Yeah,
similar for you, I kind of know what I'm going to read next for like a while, right? Like
yeah,
when you're
yeah,
writing, when you're reviewing, like,
yeah,
when you're kind of staying on top of the awards list, you kind of like know all
yeah,
the stuff that's out there. But yeah,
yeah,
when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, like I didn't know what I was going to read next. I was like
yeah,
desperate to find
yeah.
things.
Same.
Her and
Yeah,
her scenes in her little library,
yeah,
those really hit me because I grew up in this tiny little town
mm,
in the hills, and interlibrary alone absolutely saved me. We had like my current apartment is bigger than the library in my town, and like they did not have much.
yeah,
I read everything they had,
yeah,
and then I discovered interlibrary alone, and it
yeah,
was life changing. So that the what she say? I wrote it down. She says, "Interlibrary loans are a wonder of the world and a glory of
yeah,
civilization." Like I
yeah.
really felt that.
Yeah, but when I was growing up, I didn't have access to interlibrary loans, but I did have
Mm,
access to libraries. So I remember when I was a kid, at one point my parents were like, okay, they just got fed up of buying books for me, so they she took me to this local children's library, and then in a couple of years, I finished reading everything over there. So then
mm-hmm,
then my parents took me to the British Council Library, and I'm still a member there, and I was also used to take books from my school library, and I remember I came across one or two of the Anne Rice, the Vampire Chronicles books, and back then we did not have like internet. I mean, it was there. Like we had to go to a cyber cafe to access the
uh-huh,
internet. So I didn't like know okay what are big books and SF coming out now. So I remember reading just those one or two Anne Rice books, and then I had to jump to the like last book in the series that had come
mm,
out back then because
mm-hmm,
that's what the library had. And I wanted to
mm-hmm,
read the other books, but I couldn't because the local bookshops would not like have them anywhere, and
mm-hmm.
online shopping was not a thing. So
Yeah.
like so like your reading tastes become very restrained by the libraries and the bookshops that you have access to, and
Mm-hmm.
I feel like much later when I grew up and I had went to university and had access to the internet and online copies, that changed for me because now it's like okay, if I want a book I can find a way to get it, but as a
Mm-hmm.
kid you couldn't.
And there's something really interesting about engaging with a megatext, right? With like a big corpus of books that are connected, but in this kind of like accidental, hopefully serendipitous, unplanned
Yeah,
kind of way, where
yeah,
sometimes you get a book that is not the first in a series, and it's the one you
yeah,
have. I
yeah,
I
yeah,
remember like a couple series and
mm,
trilogies when I was a kid that the library or the bookstore or whatever didn't have the
yeah,
first one. I didn't even realize that sometimes.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and so you just read it, and then you're like, oh, that's weird. A
yeah,
lot of this doesn't make sense. And you go back and read the
yeah,
rest. But it's also what in miniature. One of the things this book is doing that again just hit me because it was so
mm,
So kind of true to my experience was when she starts finding that connection then and finding out that, oh, there is a conversation.
Yeah.
It's not just that there are all these books floating around, but there are also people
Yeah.
talking about them and comparing them and
Yeah.
having these discussions. And that discovery is such a huge part of the book.
Mm.
Yeah, this is great. I don't know. I love it. What do we think about? I want to get away like briefly from
Mm.
the science fiction and fantasy books
Yeah.
here. One of the things that's kind of fascinating, I think, about this book is the way it handles the magic
Mm.
and the plot that's going on. And I kept reminding myself while reading this that again, like of course, people like you and me, of course, are fascinated by the science fiction and fantasy book love throughout this book, but it's not really what the book is about. And the book does have like an arc and a story and a plot. I'm still like, this is one of those books that is tempting to read as it's not really magic, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's her imagination or it's a hallucination or, mental unwellness or something. And obviously, like, I don't think that's true. Like, I read this and I believe it. But the specific stuff with her mother is
Yeah.
so big and gigantic that it's hard to know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Like some of the littler, quote unquote, the smaller spells that Maury casts, I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. That's interesting. I
Yeah.
the way she talks about like objects sort of like retaining
Mm.
feelings of people and kind of
Memories.
attuning to
Yeah.
people. Yeah, I really dig that.
Yeah.
But then when it comes to whatever the fight was that happened before the
Yeah.
book started, that
Yeah.
winds up with her sister dying, and then the final kind of odd showdown with her
Yeah.
mother.
Yeah.
I'm not totally sure how to read them. I'm tempted to read them sort of like allegorically or something, but I don't know. What do you think?
I think the epistolary format, like this whole like the diary entries, I think it allows the reader to have like multiple interpretations of it because we don't have an omniscient third person telling us, like we
Mm,
only have a first person, very emotional and a private account of this young girl. So whether she is actually experiencing magic or whether it is just all in imagination, like it's left to the reader. And I feel like since we are like readers of fantasy and science fiction, we are more inclined to believe that okay, the fairies are real, the magic is all real in this book. But then like this book could also work as a I don't know like a literary fiction novel, and maybe that
mm,
person might like a literary fiction reader might see it okay like maybe the girl is schizophrenic or with this some mental illness stuff going on, or it's just like a magic realism sort of a thing. So I mean I think that this fine balance between magic realism and fantasy, and this
mm,
book sort of like skirts towards them both. And I think the way you interpret it also reveals like what your preferences are I personally feel like interpreting the whole thing as something that she's made up or as something that she's hallucinating to cope with the trauma and the death, like that
hmm
feels like a very sad way to read
Yeah.
it. But if you were to see it as okay, no, she is actually capable of magic, she has all these powers, she can talk to the fairies, and then the magic in the book becomes something that gives her a sense of agency, because
hmm
she can't literally fight with her evil aunts, or she cannot fight them, like going to boarding school and that. But when she does those small spells to find her a group of like-minded people and to protect herself, like the magic becomes something that gives her some agency and some control back in her life. So
hmm
in a way, reading it as a fantasy book is much more empowering. But reading it as sort of this magic realistic, where like the everything is also hallucination or something, makes it more depressing.
And I mean, she's such a inquisitive
Yeah,
and thoughtful and skeptical protagonist that to me, like, she's always asking, how do these fairies work?
yeah,
Why
yeah,
do these ones
yeah,
speak Welsh and these ones don't? How does it,
yeah,
and she's constantly thinking about it. That adds this level of reality to it, right?
yeah, yeah,
But those sort of points pinned in the beginning and the end of these, so much of the magic she does, and she talks about this, right? That there's always this sort of deniable chains of
yeah, yeah,
coincidence, and she knows that
yeah.
how magic works.
Mm.
That there's always a way to, like, when she does the
Disprove
magic,
it or just make it
yeah,
as seem like it's a coincidence or
right,
something.
right.
Yeah,
Like she has a thing, right? Like you could do a magic to make a rose appear in your hand, but it would be because like someone dropped it out of a plane by accident and you got it.
and it fell on you at just the right moment at that.
Yeah. But then the big things, right? The beginning of the book and the end of the book,
Yeah,
those feel like those don't fit into that framework very well. And
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah,
There's so much of this book that could be sort of dwelt on as trauma
Yeah.
and Maury really doesn't, right? I mean, she thinks about her sister a lot. That's obviously been a big deal. She doesn't think about her father attempting to assault her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it's not that she doesn't think about it, but she's sort of like really quickly just kind of
Yeah.
deals with it and moves on. And she doesn't really interrogate the reality of her mother and how monstrous or not her
Yeah.
mother is. Like, it's a
Yeah.
huge part of the book, and I'm just not totally sure how to read it.
Yeah.
And things like her mother sending her nightmares, right,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
coming in this sort of like spectral form to kind of threaten
Yeah.
her. Those feel like both more real in a way than some of the magic,
Mm.
and they also
Yeah.
feel like not quite of the same system, right? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think because like the nightmares and stuff are stuff that, like it happens to real people in the real world. But the
Mm-hmm.
stuff at the beginning and the end, like that seems very, very far removed from our reality. Like I feel this whole book tries to negotiate with like if magic was real, how would it exist in our world? And it sort of tries to more she's constantly like theorizing about how magic works. And there's this bit where she says that the fairies are like this sentient manifestation of the interconnectedness of this world,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that stuff about coincidences and the denial of magic, like that works, and like you said, for smaller things. But and even for nightmares, you can maybe like your evil mom is the one sending you all this black magic and giving you nightmares, or maybe you're just having these nightmares because you're traumatized.
Mm-hmm.
But the stuff at the beginning and the end, those don't fit into our notions of realism at all, because how do you have the the book pages turning into these flaming spears and all of that? So I think like the beginning and the ending, it sort of like solidifies that this book is primarily a fantasy book and it should be read as such,
Mm-hmm.
I feel.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. That's right. And there's one of the things I really like about this book is a lot of children's books and that have magic and fantasy, magical creatures and things play around a lot with the idea of sort of childish imagination, right, and holding
Yeah.
on to that. And this feels like a book that is taking the idea of childish play, childish imagination really seriously, but it's not a children's book. And I think that's one of the things I love about the way that the fairies and the magic work here,
Yeah.
right? Is that our protagonist has a kind of skeptical, science fictional,
Yeah.
rational attitude about it, and he's able to realize that they are something to do with belief, and that how you
Yeah.
change to the world. There's
Yeah.
that she has that tragic story of that like boy who's a friend of theirs who can see the fairies the one summer but not the next.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and this
Yeah.
idea of like being able to connect to something in a way you can as a kid, and
Yeah.
trying to preserve that and hold on
Yeah.
to that, which I really like. And I don't, like I said, that's something I see a lot in younger kids'
Yeah.
books, but I don't often see taken seriously in books for adults, and I just found that
Yeah.
really fascinating.
And there's one bit where she even talks about a Narnia books, and she is like angry about the way C.S. Lewis ended it, because like Susan couldn't go back to Narnia because
Mm-hmm.
she grew up or something, and then when her aunts try to get her earrings, like ears pierced so that she can wear earrings, she is like so sure, like if I get my ears pierced, I will lose my access to magic. So like she is aware that like as the more she grows up, like her hold over the fantasy, it might weaken, and she is very
Mm,
keen and very enthusiastic to preserve that, because that is
mm-hmm.
a part of who she is, and she wants to keep that alive no matter the cost.
Yeah, that's good. There's that Le Guin has a line somewhere. Oh, I can't remember what essay it's in. Shoot. Where she talks about a lot of people have the idea that becoming an adult means that the child dies, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
And that's just terrible. They did like, no, an adult should be a child that grows. And so you still kind
exactly.
of
Yeah,
have that in you.
yeah,
I also, just as I said, I wanted to get away from talking about authors for a second, but I'm failing. I love that Vonnegut's terms are so influential here, even more than like the books feel like, but the idea of the cuirass,
yeah, yeah,
and she uses like the Grand Falloon. I use Grand
yeah,
Falloon like
yeah,
regularly. Like I think this is a useful
yeah,
term. So I just love the way that comes into it. Yeah, the thing with her father and with the Heinlein, one of the things that I often find not bad, but kind of something that often troubles me about Walton's books is very frequently she has characters who are very matter of fact about things that I might expect to be
Yeah.
more emotional or sort of like a, I don't know,
Yeah.
kind of higher energy. And
Yeah.
I don't think that it's repression. You know,
Mm.
it's not like shock. It's just sometimes some people react to big major things sort of like, I don't know, people react to big giant things in your
Yeah.
life more, you
Yeah.
know, not all in the same way.
Differently.
And you
Yeah.
know, typically in a book, if you had something really traumatic happen, I feel like there's sort of like molds and stereotypes for how you
Yeah.
deal with this kind of thing literarily.
Yeah.
And so to have this protagonist, you know, like have, you know, her father like drunkenly come on to her
Yeah. Yeah.
and then just kind of like push him off and then just write about it for a couple days. Just be like,
Yeah.
oh, that was
Yeah.
weird. That was, here's what I think
Yeah.
about this. It's just, it's just different.
Yeah.
It's not endorsing it at all, obviously, but
I think it's like I think because she's already like so traumatized with like, everything that's happened to her with her mother, with her sister, that maybe it's like she just doesn't quite register how messed up that is. Like you have your
mm-hmm,
own stepfather coming on to you,
mm-hmm,
and I think she later even like she talks about like how like she feels so broken and that no one would want her,
mm-hmm,
and so she reads like it's a very like a very disturbing scene, and then when
mm-hmm,
you read her feelings about it, like she sort of like imagines that scene where basically like where she cannot even consent to anything, and the fact is basically incest, and she tries to interpret it through the lens of like, okay, like what she desired, what she wanted. Like that speaks to like how different people they process trauma like very differently,
mm-hmm,
and maybe like the way maybe I would process it would be different from the way someone else would process it, and that I think forces the reader to like see the character on their own terms.
mm-hmm,
Like to her like it is not like it is a big thing for us, but for her the bigger thing is the fact that she's already lost her sister, that she's
mm-hmm.
already like cut off from her mom. So her father doing something so heinous doesn't even register as heinous because there's so much other heinous stuff that has like going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, there's so many places in here where this could have gone much worse, right? Even
Yeah.
what we are
Yeah.
reading. I don't know. I really like the way Walton shows this character as someone who is both naive in a lot of ways, but
Yeah.
also very smart and
Yeah.
also assertive. And there are a couple great scenes here, right, where she kind of puts her foot down and stands up for herself. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's this scene where one of her relatives is kind of like right berating her for not being around, and she
Yeah.
like puts her foot down and is like, my mom is literally insane and you guys put me
Yeah.
with her, like that was not okay. Like she
Yeah.
says that, you
Yeah.
know, like a much older relative,
Yeah.
she like stands up. And there's that scene when someone like kind of like heckles her for using a cane or something, right, and she
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
dresses him down. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's really great to see. But then again, when you look at these scenes, like with her dad or like with a few other places, we're like, oh, but she is young and she is, you know, she has the sort of naivete that you have at that age, kind
Yeah.
of no matter what. Cheating here and bringing in the Feldman novel I'm reading, Notes from a Regicide, but there's a point I just read
Yeah.
in there where a
Yeah.
15-year-old character says to their kind of like adopted guardian figure, says, "I'm not a kid," and their adopted guardian figure says, "No, you are a kid. Like you're very smart and you're
Yeah.
very strong. And you're doing a lot of stuff, but you're
Yeah.
15." And I think that's Maury has she's had to become so independent.
Yeah. She's been forced to grow up instead of being able to enjoy her childhood in a safe way. Like she doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have that sense of safety. And
Mm-hmm.
also like she's also like her like she's still questioning her own sexuality, what she wants and all.
Mm-hmm.
So like she just doesn't like it's very disturbing for us as a reader that she doesn't dwell on the incident with her father much. But to her, it's just like maybe just one of those incidents that will like maybe just reveal something about her own sexuality and what she wants and whether she like but she's like it's always very insecure about whether or not she is desired because she feels that she is broken.
Mm-hmm.
And then when she meets the guy at the book club, like she's not really sure about it at all. And she
Mm-hmm.
goes to this other party with her some former friends, and this guy comes on to her, and she feels that she is doing whatever she's expected to do, but the guy is the one who acts like an asshole, and then
Mm-hmm.
she's utterly confused. So I feel all of like because her experiences are so confusing, she herself maybe doesn't quite know how to make sense of it, and maybe when
Mm-hmm.
she's much more older, she can look back and maybe that'll give her some clarity when she's older. But then because she's young, she doesn't have that clarity, and so the reader is also not privy to that level of understanding.
That thread of insecurity and kind of imposter syndrome, that's actually another area where along that line there are parts in the book that made me look at the magic differently, right? Because like when she's like, "Oh, no one could be interested in talking to me,"
Yeah,
no one could find me
yeah,
attractive, it must be the magic. That's why they're doing
yeah,
it. That was one of the things I'm like, no, like that's not the magic. And then it makes it
yeah,
feel like the magic is kind of
yeah,
a coping mechanism or like an
yeah,
explanation for why she's
yeah.
feeling this way.
And the first time she goes to the book club, I think she asked the librarian afterwards, said, "Did I speak too much?" And the librarian was like laughing and be like, "Yes, you did, but it was all fine."
Uh-huh.
Like so you can literally see her insecurity, like where she's so nervous and so afraid with these new group of people, but then she actually does have a fine time, and she does end up like speaking and having all these opinions, but then she's not sure of herself.
Mm-hmm. This I do have to say, just on a sort of craft level, this is like one of the best recreations of this type of teenager that I've ever
Yeah,
seen, right?
yeah,
And the way that it expresses it, even though you're just getting her diaries, that you can see these sort of like blind spots and how she's thinking,
yeah,
and
yeah,
these sort of like revealing, just revealing passions, revealing like the way she talks about it.
yeah,
I love how much the food is a part of it. And this seems
yeah,
like someone who really enjoys food and doesn't typically get really good food. And like,
yeah, yeah,
there's like,
yeah,
I don't know, there's like 7 different meals in here that are described as like the best thing ever, literally the best thing I've
yeah,
ever eaten.
yeah.
And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's great.
Like she gets the whole like the teenage voice so well.
Mm-hmm.
Like even the way she's writing a diary, like was like with a diary, it's like you don't always have a lot of scenes, a lot of action unfolding in real time. Would basically have this summary of whatever happened, and yet it's done in a way that it has the whole summary aspect to it, but it's not boring to read. Like you're just completely like sucked into the narrative. Like so, it was like a I don't know, like a third person or first person action story or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a lot of plot happening, but then it's also just told in the form of this diary of Anne Frank with this magical cadence sort of
Mm-hmm.
woven into it.
Yeah. I mean, I often
Hmm.
complain about like badly done epistolary when like it just
Yeah,
doesn't read like a diary, like that's so easy
yeah,
to do
yeah,
poorly. And I feel like this just gets it the whole way through. Like
yeah,
even
yeah,
though she does recreate whole scenes, right, and kind of goes back and it says who
yeah,
said what,
yeah,
and what happened. But for me, it never loses the believability that
yeah,
this person
yeah,
is actually sitting down and writing this, I think
yeah,
backwards, right,
yeah.
to code it
And it
in a
also
diary.
has the small list and like the timetables and how much marks that she
Mm,
gets in the exams, and there is small bits where she's talking about poetry. Then you find out that when she gives this poem to the guy on Valentine's Day, that she also does have, I don't know, like another diary full of poems or something, and it's only
mm-hmm.
hinted at. But then like
Yeah.
even though you don't get to see everything that she's doing, like the few journal entries that we get, like it gives us this insight into this whole inner life that she has, as well as the other things that she does. Like there's one bit where she's waiting at the doctor's and just writes this random list of whatever she sees, and that shows us okay, like this
Mm,
is how she observes the world. And
mm-hmm.
and at the end of that list, there's this bit where like she said, maybe one person I think noticed her and waved at
Mm-hmm.
her. So that also like makes us realize okay, like she does want to be seen. She wants to be seen so
Mm-hmm.
badly, but then she's living in a world where no one like it appears that no one can see her, and that's why she's
Mm-hmm.
forced to do this magic, and then she finds her own community, sort of.
Yeah, no, I love that scene. That list is great. And yeah,
Yeah.
one person looks back.
So you want to like sort of protect her and give her a hug and just tell her that no, it's all gonna be okay. And
Mm-hmm.
like every time I was reading it, I just felt like, oh my god, like I just want to protect this little kid. Like I just want to
Mm-hmm.
protect her from all the harm, even though she's
Yeah.
already survived some of the horrific things. Like you still feel
Mm-hmm.
this sense of protectiveness towards her.
And that's the other epigraph, right? Is that thing
Yeah,
from I think from someone's live journal that the
yeah,
advice to
yeah,
give to someone who's a teenager, like you're gonna find
yeah,
people like they are out there. Like it
yeah,
seems so overwhelming at that
yeah.
age, but yeah. That's a good place. Let's take a really quick break. And we are back. We are still talking about Among Others. And I wanted to hear you talk a little bit about the structure of this book, which we were talking about in the break a little bit. The idea of kind of like it sort of being after the big battle. Yeah.
Yeah, like it sort of feels like this, like it's an epilogue to this big battle, but there's also like a coda where the characters like grapple with the trauma. Like this bit where she compares to again to Tolkien, and she says this is the stuff to the scoring of the Shire, where
Mm-hmm.
you've already like dropped the ring to Mordor and defeated Gollum, but then you still have all the injuries and the wounds from the battle, and they won't disappear in a day. It's not like you fight the big bad guy and then you just get your happy ending. You have to
Mm-hmm.
work towards it, and the main character, she's lost her twin and she's disabled now, and she has to live with that. She goes for all these acupuncture sessions, and then she takes these small steps to fix her life by doing the protection spells, finding a book club, finding her sense of community, and then when it's when the book ends, it's not like she has everything solved or anything. She has like she's still like still trying to figure it out, but then we get this sense of movement that okay, like now we are getting somewhere. She is gonna do better in life. Her leg is healing. She has friends now. She has a boyfriend.
Yeah, totally. Like that this book isn't recreating the sort of like tidy artificial plot
Yeah,
arc, right? That
yeah,
it might.
yeah,
And that's one of the things that makes it, I don't know, to me at least feel more
yeah,
real. Well, I still like I maintain that the final like weird fight with her mother, like it just sits weird with me for some reason. I can't quite put my finger on it. It just kind of feels plunked in there somehow. But that when the book ends, you really
yeah,
strongly have the feeling that this isn't the end for this
yeah,
character, right? This is just
yeah,
kind of the end of this chapter.
yeah,
And that is done really, really well.
yeah,
I think there's maybe something too with a lot of it maybe being less really about her mom than dealing
yeah,
with the loss of her sister, right? And
yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's sort of the bigger thing coming to grips with here.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like she's kind of like sort of mentally and physically cut off from her mom. Like she's realized that like she has to put up these strong boundaries, otherwise like
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna become very toxic and harmful for her.
Mm-hmm.
But with the sister that she like she like there's this bit in the beginning where like no, she and the sister, they would like interchange their names, like people couldn't tell each other apart,
Mm-hmm.
and now it's like there's this permanent hole where her sister used to be, so that grief is much more like stronger, and then and takes her the entirety of the book to come to terms with it. Like I would say that this book is essentially about like dealing with the grief of losing a loved one and finding
Mm-hmm.
ways to move on and keep on living.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we haven't talked about it a ton yet, but that's really one of the biggest things about this book is about
Yeah,
is about grief and loss. And again, this is I don't want to make this like too personal, but this is reading this. There were so many. The first time I read this, and then I remembered it all coming back to it this time. There's so many things here that rhymed weirdly with my life that it was just strange.
yeah,
I had someone who yeah, I had someone who's lost with a very similar name to this and who like
oh,
had a problem walking and like
yeah,
really struck me like that those the sisters that was really bizarre to me. And a lot of the I've already talked about how much the bookishness
yeah,
lines up with my childish bookishness.
yeah,
The idea of being in the hills and valleys in Wales, again, eerily similar. So I grew up in the Appalachian Plateau in Pennsylvania,
yeah,
which is like very similar landscape,
yeah,
and these old coal towns that used to be like they were boom towns and then they've gone away. So like all the towns have kind of shrunk.
yeah,
And I remember being like, as a kid, I'd be out like in the woods, like kind of rambling around, and you would just
yeah,
find like foundations, or you would find like an abandoned building that the forest had kind of like reclaimed. And that's so similar to the way she's talking about it here. You know, she says, I wrote the line down. It says, "We thought we were living in a fantasy landscape when actually we were living in a science fictional
science
one."
fiction, yeah,
Yeah, and that feeling of kind of like being in this, because so much of like a lot of this book, the way it's thinking about magic and the fairies and thinking about Tolkien is that's about disenchantment, right? And it's about the
yeah,
way that magic is kind of leaving the world. You know, the elves are going into the west, the
yeah,
fairies are disappearing, there's less and less magic. You grow up, you don't see it as much. But there's also this little thread in here about reenchantment, right? And
yeah,
where the fairies really like to be is not the absolute wilderness, but they like to
Yeah.
be in human places that have become overgrown again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it has this little thread of that coming back. And that just, yeah, I don't know, that reminded me so much of my youth, kind of going around this sort of odd reclaimed, it's been damaged by
Yeah.
industry, but now like the trees are coming back. So yeah, it's a weird hopeful magic piece for it for me.
And also, I think goes on to prove the plausible deniability of magic. Like maybe this book
Mm.
was just meant to find you,
Yeah, I
like
know, right?
magic. Yeah.
Ugh. Chains of coincidence. It was just set up.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, really, it is.
I mean, all the use for magic that the protagonist makes in this book, like we could just apply them to our own world. Like if
Mm-hmm.
magic does exist here, like this is how it would manifest, like
Mm-hmm.
through these chains of coincidences and everything.
Yep. I don't know. There's so many kinds of books. There are books that you see the description of them and you just know you're going to love them and you're right,
Yeah,
and those books are great. And there are books that you don't know anything about, and they can
yeah,
surprise you and you really like them.
yeah,
And then there are books that where the description of them sounds like they could be really annoying or like you wouldn't
yeah,
like them. And when
yeah,
those work, those are so great. And this, like, from afar, this book to me is like,
yeah,
oh, it's about the magic of storytelling and the magic of books. I'm like,
yeah,
blah,
yeah,
I don't want that. So the fact that it works so well, this could
yeah,
so easily be, what's the word I'm looking for? This could so easily be saccharine. This could
yeah,
so
yeah,
easily be like
yeah,
really nauseatingly sweet and
yeah,
like really
yeah,
leaning into the nostalgia. But the
yeah,
combination of how good Walton is at doing this voice and this
yeah,
character and handling the magic and handling the,
yeah,
the, the way it's approaching the thematic concerns
yeah,
with the books and the science fiction and fantasy. I think
yeah,
because of how specific it stays. Like,
mm,
it's so easy to just be like, the magic of books. Ooh, the
yeah,
magic of books. This is not about the magic of books. This is about the magic
yeah,
of like these specific books and like really
yeah,
thinking about
yeah,
their characters and the way that characters from The Dispossessed and Trouble on Triton,
yeah,
uh, you know, become like sort of part of
yeah.
Moore's brain and
In
part of
a
how
yeah,
she's
well,
thinking about
yeah.
things.
And also feel like this book is very textured. Like it's not
Mm,
just a love letter to fantasy and sci-fi. It's also a boarding school narrative. It's also
mm-hmm,
a coming of age story, which is
mm-hmm,
told in the form of these diary entries.
mm-hmm,
And there's also this very real magic that the narrator faces and like learns to harness to improve her life. And
mm-hmm.
also like the narrator is kind of like unreliable because after all we don't get to see anyone else's perspective. We only get
Right.
her. So and then there's also this whole the Welsh countryside and the threat of the environment, like the wilderness disappearing, and with the fairies, right? Because with all of the urbanization and the changing landscape, like the fairies have to go somewhere else. And then it's also like the book tries to locate itself as part of this longer tradition of sci-fi
Mm,
fantasy,
mm-hmm,
and and at the same time it also like sort of archives all these books, both important and less important books,
mm-hmm,
some of the books that she reads are stuff that we're all familiar with, and there are books that we've also like never heard of. So
mm-hmm.
the very act of keeping a diary and keeping all these lists has this sort of an archival value. Like she is basically curating and maintaining her own canon of sci-fi, and
Mm-hmm.
then every sci-fi fantasy reader, we all have a personal canon that shapes us. So I think the book is actually doing like so many things, but then like Walton, like she does it so well that like it
Yeah.
gets you get this full complete narrative. Like
Mm-hmm. We haven't even talked about the sort of like depth of family world
yeah,
building and plot
yeah,
that she does, like on both sides of the family with these complex,
yeah.
right, like
The
divorces
whole
and
family
remarriages.
history.
Yeah, the
Yeah, it's
the
a little confusing, but yeah, it's quite
mm-hmm.
like interesting to read about
Right.
it.
Discovering that there's this like Jewish connection that's been
Yeah,
obscured that she's very interested in,
yeah,
and yeah, there's a lot of great stuff here. But I think you're right that the one of the biggest and best things about this is, yeah, it's thought about the canon and sort of like personal
yeah,
pantheons and keeping these conversations going. And that's something that Walton, I mean, is so good at as a critic. I mean, I love
yeah,
her informal history of the Hugos and
yeah,
her collections and her works online are
yeah,
always interested in looking at how do these
yeah,
things keep going? How do they build on each other? How do they inform things? Which is great. Also, just shouting out that the book ends on a CJ Cherryh reference, which is near and dear to my heart. So, I don't know
yeah,
if you've read Gate of Ivrel, but it is indeed really
yeah,
brill. Very weird though. Early Cherry is great. Oh, this
yeah.
is good. Yeah, I'm really glad we picked this. This was fun to go through and kind of revisit. Any final thoughts? Any last things about the book? that are on your mind?
Yeah, I also found it interesting that when she engages with magic, she's also concerned about the ethics of it. Like she's
Mm.
constantly worried that okay, like is she manipulating people and all, and that also shows
Mm-hmm.
like how she's different from her mother because it would seem that her mother would use magic to control other people, but here
Mm-hmm.
she is trying to use magic to just like make small changes to make her life bearable,
Mm-hmm.
but she's also like so conflicted, and like when she meets the Rim and she kind of falls for him, she's afraid like is the magic making them fall in love, or is it really real?
Mm-hmm.
And I like that, she's very concerned with how does one use magic in an ethical way,
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah, no, 100%. And it lines up again so much with Tolkien with the ring and this idea of
yeah,
corruption. And like, right,
yeah,
she has that sort of like minor note looking at her mother and just realizing like, well, her mother and
yeah,
also her three aunts that
yeah, yeah,
do the
yeah,
magic, just realizing like this stuff is bad for you, like exerting control over people,
yeah, yeah,
trying to dominate people. That's just it's
yeah,
bad for you too. It's a
yeah.
great line.
Yeah, like magic becomes this metaphor for power and manipulation, and but
Mm-hmm.
then it's the way you use magic that like magic itself perhaps isn't good or bad, but then it's the way
Mm-hmm.
that you use it that makes the
Mm-hmm.
difference. And even though she's 50, she is having all these important conversations with herself about okay, if she is going to use magic, then how what is the right way to use it? What is the
Mm-hmm.
right way to live? So
Yeah, and I feel
yeah,
like there's a lot of little tiny threads here about things like consent, things like
yeah, yeah,
consensus models, like figuring out how to talk to a group and make decisions with a group, how to
yeah,
talk to another person and be honest about these big things. You know, that she feels the need to tell Wim
yeah,
about the magic, like enough that he gets why it's ethically a concern. It's like it's
yeah.
interesting. Yeah, it's good. This is great. Before we get going, is there anything you wanted to share about things you're working on or where people can find you or anything good you got coming out?
Yeah, I do have I guess like reviews coming out in the usual places like Strange Horizons and Locus, and I'm also like juggling between different short fiction and long form projects, and again juggling is hard. Like I would always advise people to never be a freelancer because being a freelancer is
Yeah.
is a method.
Yeah.
I struggle with self discipline all the time. So yeah, it's just a lot of juggling. It's not very fun. But yeah, like you can find me at the like on Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram. Like I'm terminally online and doom scrolling. So anytime feel
Yeah.
free to say hi with and drop new book recommendations or something.
Yeah. Well, based on the amount of things you have coming out, it seems like you're juggling pretty well. So congrats on that.
Oh, thank you.
Did your
Yeah.
Locus year end come online yet?
Yeah, it already it came
Oh,
out.
cool. Yeah, I'll have to
I'm
make sure.
excited to read yours as well. I enjoyed your review of the West Passage, which is one of my favorite
Oh,
fantasy books of last
thank you.
year.
Oh my gosh, so much fun, right?
Yeah, it's
And
so whimsy, and like it
mm-hmm,
has this like it's a medieval manuscript basically like coming alive, and like I
mm-hmm,
just love the surreal world building, and it's also like just very wryly funny, and like,
mm-hmm.
it's just so refreshing and whimsical. Like I don't have any other word to describe it, but yeah, it's so I wish there were more books like it, but then like it's so unique. Like I don't think you could just recreate that. But
That
yeah,
feels like a book that the book club, in among others, would talk about, right? And the fact
yeah,
that
yeah,
it's so whimsical, but I keep trying to talk about the way that it's whimsical, but it feels like serious at the same
yeah,
time.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
that's something about not just children's literature, but like
yeah,
literature that children could read. I feel like that's so
yeah,
essential. Like,
yeah,
and it's something that can be lost, I think, in adult fantasy and science fiction books where
yeah,
like writers and readers get into this mindset of kind of like, yeah, we kind of know how it all works and just kind of going through
yeah,
the motions. But to make it
yeah,
feel like, no, it really is real. It's really dangerous. The
yeah,
scary things are really
yeah,
scary. That makes all the whimsical stuff that much more
yeah,
potent. All of the, like
yeah,
in the West Passage, all of the strange little creatures and like
yeah,
odd little
yeah,
people you meet, they just feel more real because the whole thing
yeah,
doesn't feel like just make believe. It feels like, I don't know,
yeah,
real. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, good, cool. Well, that was a West Passage rant. Friend of the pod, Jared Pekachuk. But yeah, thanks so much. This was great. I really enjoyed reading this
Thank
again
you
with you.
so much for having me. I had a lovely time. This is my
Yeah.
first podcast.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
So,
Well, maybe we'll do it again
yeah.
sometime, and we'll catch you around online. A Meal of Thorns is a podcast from the Ancillary Review of Books, an online magazine founded to address the radical possibilities of criticism, with a focus on speculative fiction, world literature, and utopian impulses. Go to ancillaryreviewofbooks.org for regular reviews, essays, interviews, and more. Our opening poem is by Barcha Hari, translated by John Bruff. Our music is by Giselle Gabriel Garcia. Our artwork is by Rob Patterson at The Ratio Farm. If you'd like to support the podcast and the Ancillary Review of Books, that is very cool of you. Go to patreon.com/ancillary review to become a backer. Come hang out with us on Discord. If you heard us talk about a book and you want to buy that book, check out our show notes for a bookshop link. We get a cut. Finally, you know the drill. Leaving a review or a rating really helps wherever you listen to us. Sharing our posts on your favorite social media really helps. Telling someone out on the street that you should check us out. I don't know if that'll help or not. It might if they like speculative fiction. Questions, suggestions, pedantic notes about things we got wrong? Drop us an email at mealofthorns@gmail.com. By the way, we spent the last little bit of the episode raving about Jared Pekacek's novel The West Passage, which turned out to be extremely timely, as that just won the Crawford Award this past weekend. So that's a big congrats from Meal of Thorns, and another nudge to you, dear listener, to pick that up. Okay, next episode is coming at you on April 7th. We're talking Love in the Mist with theater and fantasy scholar Marita Arvaniti. After that, an ambitious 2-book episode on The Moon is a Harsh Mistress and the Terraformers with Christian P. Haynes. If you'd like to read ahead, check out our lineup at ancillaryreviewofbooks.org/A Meal of Thorns. Until next time, stay critical, and good luck out there.
Climate change is scary.
I know, there's just no place safe. But we have to come together as a world somehow. I don't know. I would gladly do some magic to
Same.
do something
Like,
about that.
where do we have movies magic when we need it?
Yeah, do some carbon drawdown, get some good taxes on the big corporations or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Oof.